All right, this is Numbers 31 in the Prager Rational Bible. Let's begin. It starts off with an essay. A morally difficult chapter. That's true. Morally speaking, Numbers 31 is a very difficult chapter. The alleged annihilation of the Midianites, including the killing of male children and adult females, it's used by critics of the Bible as an example of the moral uselessness of the Bible. It has likely sown doubts into the minds of many believers. And I deal with this problem in two essays. The moral problem of killing men, women, and children in the Torah at Deuteronomy 2, verses 34 through 36, and also the moral problem of the destruction of the Canaanite cities at Numbers 21 in verses 2 and 3. And I hope readers troubled by this problem will read those two essays. And I will briefly note some of the points made in those essays and also add a seventh point. So, number one, no principles of warfare are to be learned from the wars against the Midianites or the Canaanites. These are singular events. The Torah is not offering principles, it's describing events. It's descriptive, not prescriptive. 2. While the one-off wars against Canaan and Midian have no eternal lessons, the moral principles of the Torah and the rest of the Bible do. The Ten Commandments are one such example. Well, ultimately the lesson is you better turn from sin because there's ultimately judgment. 3. The Hebrew Bible itself later records that neither the Canaanites nor the Midianites were close to being annihilated. Yeah, they weren't annihilated. 4. If they did in fact happen, they happened either by divine order or not. If they were not divinely ordered, the Israelites simply waged wars in the same way that every nation waged war at that time. On the other hand, if we are not dealing with the fairy tale and God did order destruction on the Canaanite cities and the male Midianite children, well then one must assume that the God, the creator of the universe, the God who instructed us to love our neighbor as ourselves, knew what he was doing, just as he knew what he was doing when he destroyed the whole world in the Great Flood. 5. If one uses the wars against the Canaanites and the Midianites to reject the Torah and the God of the Torah as moral guides, what will that one replace them? What will one replace them with? With conscience? See the essay on the weakness of the conscience in Numbers 21:3. With reason? Well, see the essay, False Gods, Reason, regarding reason without God or the Bible in Exodus 20, verse 3. You can read that in the Exodus Rational Bible. Yep. With government, big governments made the genocides of the 20th century the most murderous century in history possible. Yep. So yeah, you want to get rid of God in the Bible, then what are you going to replace that with? Well, ultimately it ain't going to be good. 6. The reason the behavior recorded in the Torah disturbs us is the Torah itself gave humanity the moral standards that induce such a disturbance. As Princeton philosopher Walter Kaufman wrote, our social conscience comes largely from the religion of Moses. And then there's a footnote there that gives the source. Walter Kaufman, The Faith of a Heretic, Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University Press, 1959. Okay. All right. And societies by the Torah societies not influenced by the Torah or they've rejected it have not been disturbed by atrocities. Japan, for example, committed monstrous atrocities against Asians in the 20th century that were far worse than anything recorded in the Torah or the book of Joshua. The Japanese conscience was not disturbed by these actions. The Japanese used fully conscious, anesthetized, however you say that, anesthetized Chinese civilians and hideous, non-anesthetized, there you go, Chinese civilians and hideous medical experiments, just as Nazi doctors did in Nazi death camps. They used hundreds of thousands of Korean and other Asian women as sex slaves to be raped by 2 dozen Japanese soldiers on a daily basis. Japan never expressed anywhere near the regret, nor ever took anywhere near the moral responsibility that Germany did for the Holocaust. Germany was a part of Western civilization, the civilization morally formed by the Bible, but sadly is being destroyed more and more because we rejected the Bible. And we've imported so many people that hate biblical values. Yep, which is, I guess, why Democrats win. In other societies never influenced by the Torah, such as the indigenous peoples of North and South America, torture was a normative practice, as was human sacrifice. Every society has committed evils, but societies without the Torah did not develop as morally as those that affirmed the Torah. Nor were they troubled by their evils, because once again, to cite Walter Kaufmann, our social conscience comes largely from the religion of Moses. I wonder if that right there may have been his 7th point. Yeah, because he has 6 there. So, anyway. Alright, why take vengeance on Midian? Alright, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Avenge the Israelite people on the Midianites." So God commanded Moses to take revenge on the Midianites, the nation that a short time earlier used its women to seduce Israelite men into abandoning their religion and their values and adopting the Midianite gods. Chapter 25. And of course, Balaam helped to set that up. Had the Midianites succeeded, this would have meant the end of the Israelite people, because the nation of Israel was based on an idea, not an ethnicity. The end of the Israelite idea, ethical monotheism. The 10 Commandments, the law, and the values ultimately written in the Torah, means the end of Israel. If you have the end of the Israelite idea. And this constitutes another Hebrew parallel with America. America, too, has also been an idea, not an ethnicity. Thus, the loss of America's fundamental ideas, specifically liberty, e pluribus unum, from any one, and in God we trust, the 3 values that appear on all the American coinage. So losing those ideas, the American Trinity, as Prager calls it, that would mean the end of America. God took the Israelites out of Egypt to worship the one true God of justice and mercy, not the gods of human sacrifice and temple sex. Moses, speaking on behalf of God, repeatedly demanded of Pharaoh, "Let my people go, so that they may worship me." God's order to Moses to avenge the Midianites was Moses' final task, but God's command was vague. It's not clear what avenge means here. The Torah is similarly non-specific in Numbers 25:16 through 18. And either God explained to Moses precisely what he meant, but the details are not recorded in the Torah, or God allowed Moses to decide how to avenge the Midianites. Yep, and then you shall be gathered to your kin. So by telling Moses that he was about to die, God once again reminded Moses that he would not enter into the promised land. Ronald Allen offers an additional observation. Moses will die because God wills it. Others die of illness, infirmity, or injury, or simply from the cumulative, it's hard to say that, effects of aging. Moses' death, however, was not to be from any common cause. His death was to be at the express agency of God. And moreover, at the time of his death, Moses was in superb health and physical vigor. Alright, verse 3. Moses spoke to the people, saying, "Let men be picked out from among you for a campaign, and let them fall upon Midian to wreak the Lord's vengeance on Midian. And you shall dispatch on the campaign 1,000 from every one of the tribes of Israel." So Moses required the conscription of only 1,000 soldiers from each tribe. The Midianites were not a particularly large nation, so 12,000 total. So 1,000 from each tribe were furnished from the divisions of Israel, 12,000 picked for the campaign. And Moses dispatched them on the campaign, 1,000 from each tribe. According to Nachmanides, however you say that, or Ramban, the reason for such a small number of fighters was that only men not involved in sinning with the Midianite women and in worship of the Midianite god Peor, even indirectly, could be chosen for this mission, and there were such few men. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, serving as priest, was on the campaign and equipped with the sacred utensils and the trumpets for sounding the blasts. And according to Polinsky, a military priest was not present in any of the military campaigns earlier in the book of Numbers, the wars against Sihon and Og and the Amorites, because those wars were fought with purely material objectives. But conversely, the purpose of this war with Midian was to restore moral and spiritual values. Phinehas was the only logical person to serve as priest on this campaign, because he halted the Midianite effort to seduce the Israelite men away from ethical monotheism. Yep. Numbers 25, 6 through 12. 7. They took the field against Midian as the Lord commanded them, and slew every male. So at first read, this verse seems to say that God commanded Moses to have every Midianite male slain. But if that were the case, as the Lord had commanded Moses, the words would have most likely have been placed after the words, as the Lord commanded Moses, and slew every male, and not after. Those would not be placed after the words, they took the field against Midian. So basically probably it would say, as the Lord commanded Moses. Yeah, they slew every male, and then I guess they took the field against Midian. So I guess the order, I guess there, they took the field, and then as the Lord commanded Moses, and slew every male, I guess maybe suggesting that probably that order. Then maybe they really did not slay every single male. Yeah, there it is. They took the field against Midian, and they slew every male as the Lord commanded Moses. And given where these words are placed in the verse, and given that only God said avenge the Midianites, there's no reason to assume that God ordered the Israelites to kill every male. Moreover, every male is just an expression. It's not a statistical fact. We know this because the Midianites were not close to being wiped out. When we get to verse 18, you'll see there's a little commentary there. Almost every modern scholar believes slew every male is not to be taken literally. And here is Allen, for example. The report that they killed every man does not necessarily mean that they killed every individual without exception, but that there was a complete defeat. Yeah, and this is actually something that I've heard from Frank Turek, and I think even in that book, Is God a Moral Monster? Whenever you have some of these phrases here in the Old Testament, kill them all, annihilate them, destroy them, it's not really always to be taken literally. Sometimes it's just like an expression, basically, like defeat them, beat them in battle or whatever. Kind of like when you're watching a game, basically you hope your favorite team would destroy the other team. They don't literally destroy the other team, they just beat the team in the game. So maybe something kind of similar like that, just an expression. Yeah, complete defeat, basically. And here is Timothy Ashley, who said, the statement in verse 7 need mean nothing more than the Israelites killed every male that they found whenever they attacked the Midianites. So maybe just the ones that they found, maybe not every single one of them. It is ironic that anti-religious critics mock those who take the Bible literally, but yet they insist every male be taken literally. Along with their other victims, they slew the kings of Midian, Evi, however you say that, Evi, and Racham, and Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian, and they also put Balaam, the son of Beor, to the sword. So Balaam, of course, was the pagan prophet whom the king of Moab tried to hire to curse the Israelite people. And of course, the reason for Balaam getting killed is explained in verse 16. Okay, 9. Israelites took the women and the children of the Midianites captive and seized as booty all of their beasts, all of their herds, and all their wealth. And they destroyed by fire all the towns in which they were settled and their encampments. They gathered all the spoil and all the booty, the men and beast. And then they brought the captives, the booty, the spoil to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the whole Israelite community at the camp in the steeps of Moab, at the Jordan near Jericho. And Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the chieftains of the community came out to meet them outside the camp. And Moses became very angry with the commanders of the army, the officers of thousands and the officers of hundreds who had come back from the military campaign. Moses said to them, "You have spared every female, yet they are the very ones who, at the bidding of Balaam, induced the Israelites to trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor, so that the Lord's community was struck by the plague." So Moses was angry because the very people who most directly caused the Israelites to abandon God and their covenant, the Midianite women were spared. The Israelites' soldiers either did not understand the order to take vengeance on the Midianites as an order to kill women, or they did understand the order and they just ignored it. Essay: The order to kill the Midianites. 17. Now therefore slay every male among the children, slay also every woman, slay every woman who has known a man carnally. So Moses ordered the killing of every Midianite woman who has known a man carnally. And this is generally understood to mean every adult Midianite woman, especially in the light of the next verse, which specifies sparing every young woman who had not had carnal relations with the man. And a possible reason for the order to slay the Midianite women was their role in seducing the Israelite men from God's moral laws and religious laws. An argument for this possibility in Deuteronomy, Moses ordered that the Canaanite women be spared whenever the Israelites conquered Canaan, Deuteronomy 20:14. Therefore, his use of the words "has known a man carnally" must have had significance. Had he wanted all the adult Midianite women killed, he presumably would have used that same language that he later used in Deuteronomy. And regarding the Midianite male children, as previously noted, there was no indication that God ordered the Israelites to kill them. And the same is true regarding women who had known a man carnally. Women who'd known a man carnally. It would appear that those were Moses' interpretations of God's command to avenge the Midianites. And there's no way to know whether Moses' orders regarding the war against the Midianites are what God wanted. But we could say that these orders are unique in the Torah and very rare in the Bible. And we can also say that they had nothing to do with ethnic bias. This is not racism. This is not a genocide. It's sinocide, as I heard Frank Turek say. And the Torah goes out of its way to affirm that no group, with the exception of the Amalekites, is bad, and there are very good people in very evil societies. As negatively as the Midianite nation is depicted, while Moses' wife Zipporah, she was a Midianite, and was Moses's most trusted advisor, Zipporah's father Jethro. He was a Midianite priest who became a believer in Yahweh. To cite another example, a righteous member of every nation in the Torah, of an enemy nation in the Torah, but you had a righteous member of an enemy nation. Of course, you had the daughter of Pharaoh. Of course, the Pharaoh in Exodus 1 who ordered the murder of the babies. But of course, Pharaoh's daughter who ended up saving Moses' life. And furthermore, the Bible itself makes it clear that the Israelites did not come close to slaying all the Midianite men, women, and children, and male children. Well, of course, in the book of Judges, the Midianites again emerged as enemies of Israel, plundering crops and cattle and leaving no sustenance in Israel and ravaging the land. Because of Israel's disobedience, their idolatry and all that. So this was judgment. And after 7 years of Midianite oppression, God sent Gideon to throw off the Midianite yoke. So clearly Moses' decree was not fulfilled. And of course, the story of Gideon in Judges, that's in Judges 6. Judges 6, 1 through 6. When you read about the Midianite oppression, and then of course God calling Gideon to deliver the people from the Midianites. Alright, and Richard Elliott Friedman adds, the text never reports that Moses' order was carried out. There is a mention of retaining the virgin women as captives, but no mention of the execution of the women who had known men or of the male infants. It's possible to imagine that maybe they were released or they were allowed to escape, and that maybe Moses acquiesces in this. Spare every young woman who has not had carnal relations with a man. So the Hebrew actually says spare for you, not spare. So these women could be an Israelite's servant or their wife, but they could not be sex slaves. The Torah explicitly prohibits sexual use of females conquered in war. Yep, and there's a reference to Deuteronomy 21:10-14, and there's an essay, the earliest known ban on rape in the time of war. Yeah, the Bible does forbid rape, even if some want to say otherwise. Yep. Well, of course, if a man raped a woman, yeah, that man would be put to death. Alright, verse 19. You shall then stay outside the camp 7 days, everyone among you or among your captives who has slain a person or touched a corpse shall cleanse himself on the 3rd and 7 days. So anything representing death was in an impure state and required purification. Thus the soldiers who came into contact with the dead bodies had to go through a purification process before they could return to the Israelite camp. The Midianites were an enemy that tried to destroy Israel, but their dead were dead human beings. And perhaps this instruction served as a reminder of that fact. And you shall also cleanse every cloth, every article of skin, everything made of goat's hair, and every object of wood. Eleazar the priest said to the troops who had taken part in the fighting, this is the ritual law that the Lord has enjoined upon Moses. Gold and silver, copper, iron, tin and lead, and any article that can withstand fire, those you shall pass through fire, and they shall be clean, except that they must be cleansed with the water of purification, and anything that cannot withstand fire you must pass through water. And on the 7th day you shall wash your clothes and be clean. After that you may enter the camp. And then the Lord said to Moses, you and Eleazar the priest and the family heads of the community take an inventory of the booty that was captured, man and beast, and divide the booty equally between the combatants who engaged in the campaign and the rest of the community. So the booty was to be divided equally between the combatants and the rest of the Israelite people. Since the combatants were a small percentage of the population, they were rewarded with far more booty than the other Israelites. And you shall exact a levy for the Lord in the case of the warriors who engaged in the campaign, 1 item in 500 of persons, oxen, asses, donkeys, and sheep. And they shall be taken from their half share and be given to Eleazar the priest as a contribution to the Lord. From the half share of the other Israelites you shall withhold 1 in every 50, human beings as well as cattle, asses, sheep, and all the animals, and give them to the Levites who attend to the duties of the Lord's tabernacle. So regarding 1 in 50 human beings, Milgram assumes that these people worked as menial laborers for the Levites. And this verse can perhaps be understood as a vindication of my earlier explanation that the Israelites did not carry out Moses' order to kill the Midianites. Yep, probably some of those women were left alive too. Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. The amount of booty other than the spoil that the troops had plundered came to 675,000 sheep. So basically all the numbers in amounts cited in these verses are inordinarily large. And inordinarily large, whatever. Perhaps they are deliberately inflated in an effort to cast the military effort in the most positive light. And I believe the problem of the inordinately large numbers in the Torah has been solved. And see the problem of the numbers of the Israelites in the Torah in Numbers 1:46. It's important to recognize that the numbers were regarded very differently in ancient times than in modern times. So you had 675,000 sheep, 72,000 head of cattle, 72,000 head of cattle, and then 61,000 asses, and a total of 32 human beings, namely the women who had not had carnal relations. Okay, so maybe they did take out those other women. Thus, the half share of those who had engaged in the campaign were as follows. The number of sheep was 337,500, and the Lord's levy from the sheep was 675. And the cattle came to 36,000, from which the Lord's levy was 72. And the asses came to 30,500, from which the Lord's levy was 61. And the number of human beings was 16,000, which the Lord's levy was 32. Yep. And I think this is the one in 500. Yeah, so probably if you multiply those by 500, the 72 times 500, I think that's 36,000. So, yep, and Moses gave the contributions levied for the Lord to Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses. As for the half share of the other Israelites, which Moses withdrew from the men who had taken the field, that half share of the community of sheep consisted of 337,500 sheep, 36,000 head of cattle, and 30,500 asses, and 16,000 human beings. All right. And from the half share of the Israelites, Moses withheld 1 in every 50 humans and the animals, and he gave them to the Levites who attended to the duties of the Lord's tabernacle, as the Lord had commanded Moses. The commanders of the troop divisions, the officers of thousands, the officers of hundreds approached Moses, and they said to Moses, "Your servants have made a check of the warriors in our charge, and not one of us is missing." So it's not clear whether the commanders asserted that every soldier came back alive or that there were no missing bodies, but in either case, the fact that not a soldier was missing or perhaps even killed was a miracle. 50. So we have brought as an offering to the Lord such articles of gold as each of us came upon: armlets, bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and pendants, that the atonement may be made for our persons before the Lord. And Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted the gold from them, all kinds of wrought articles, and all the gold that was offered by the officers of thousands and the officers of hundreds as a contribution to the Lord. And all of that came to 16,750 shekels. But in the ranks, everyone kept his booty for himself, and so Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted the gold from the officers of thousands and the officers of hundreds and brought it to the tent of meeting as a reminder on behalf of the Israelites before the Lord. Okay, well, that's actually the end of Numbers 31, so Lord willing, I guess I'll see what Numbers 32 has another time. But until then, may God bless you and the grace and mercy won by Jesus, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.